The views and opinions of the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
Good morning and welcome to Guardian Radio AM. This is CA Newry and today is December 1st, 2023. Yesterday was the last day of the hurricane season. You know what? I bought all kind of corned beef and tuna and all kind of flashlight with batteries and there was no hurricane. Mind you, I'm not complaining, right? But I thought it was going to at least be one, But I'm grateful still. But in order to have this conversation, I say, I got to call Wayne Neely and find out what went wrong. Because he made some predictions and I said, this is completely contrary to what he said. And Aaron Green is joining me today. And I know we spoke about the hurricane season. And I want you to give brief commentary until I bring on Mr. Wayne Neely, the Met Office guy who predicts hurricane, right? That's his job.
Yeah.
To explain what happened, what went wrong, why it was so different. What do you have to say about that?
I don't want to call you a liar, right? But I'm
Yes.
telling you, there was a storm. There was a hurricane. There was a hurricane
Where?
on the northeast of New Providence Island.
They call it rain, hard rain.
About 2 weeks ago.
They call it hard
That
rain.
was definitely a
No.
weekend and a half ago. 2 weeks ago, that was a hurricane, sir.
No, that was a hard rain.
There was gale force winds
No, that's hard rain.
running through my neighborhood.
If my child had to go to school, and he
Oh, no.
that was hard rain.
I missed one day of school.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
There ain't no hurricane never stopped me from going to school.
Okay, you're different.
You're different, yeah.
Yes, but without further ado, Wayne, thank you very much for joining us again.
It's good to be back.
Yes, and what happened?
We were wrong.
Yes, you were wrong. I know
Yes,
that.
I know. Dead wrong. We were wrong for the right reasons, though. I mean, that sounds a little obscene, but when beginning of the hurricane season, you take a look at the conditions that you presently have, the conditions that you forecast to have, and you give basically a educated guess of what's going to happen for the hurricane season. You look at the sea surface temperatures, you look at the strength and position of what we call the Bermuda High, we look at our rainfall in the Sahel region of Africa, we look at other things, and we also look at disturbances, such natural occurring phenomena such as El Nino and La Nina. And you also look at other factors. You look at weather models, see if you prognosticate those into the future and see what possibility conditions you're going to get in the future. And this year we forecast the impact of El Nino, and it occurred. El Nino occurred, but not to the extent that the expert had predicted it would occur. Mm-hmm. And second, it also what we underestimated was the warmth of the atmosphere. This is the warmest year on record.
Yes.
I think we all know that. Mm-hmm. And that played a significant factor. And what happened is that the seas were much warmer. So it's like you had the seas were like the fire, the gasoline, you poured gasoline on fire, and the fire is so big that it's difficult for the water, the fire engine to out the water in such a quick.
But I assume the warm weather would have impacted the hurricane, that it will be more hurricanes, more active.
Yeah, we've had 20 named storms.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were forecasting 12 to 13 named storms.
We just happen to be, okay.
So we had more storms, and that was because the warmer waters. And this year has been the warmest on record, the warmest July, the warmest June, the warmest August on record. And this year has been the warmest year we've ever had since we started keeping records in 1851. Mm-hmm. So
the prediction was sort of right. There were lots of storms.
No, the prediction, we forecast below a normal season.
Right.
Initially, when the warnings came out, in the April forecast, they forecasted 12 named storms.
Right.
And initially, and to December, they went for 10 named storms. Then in April, they went for 12.
Right.
And then as the season progressed, they went up to 15 named storms. And by that time, they only had 2 names that were left on the list.
Okay. So the what went right is that there were no direct hits.
No, there were no. We had two. One that went further west of us, and one that went further east of us. Now, the one if we'd gotten that one further east of us, that would have been catastrophic. That could have been another Dorian, because that was a Category 5 hurricane, and the only thing that saved us was a trough that came over the southeast Bahamas, and that blocked that tropical cycle, that hurricane from.
I hear you, Mr. Neely, say
Yes.
the only thing that saved us was the trough.
Yes, the Hail Mary pass, let's call it.
I have Bahamians
Yes,
on my social media page, so they prayed these hurricanes
away. Yes.
and that prayer changes things, and
Yes.
that prayer intervened, and that's the reason why we had no hurricane.
Could be. Well, I'm a scientist. People say we've been lucky, we've been fortunate, not having any devastating hurricanes. And they said, I remember my sister one time, my sisters told me, look, Wayne, we don't get hurricane. Whenever the hurricane comes close to us, it always turns away. And that year, that was like Francis of 2005. And I say that one ain't come, that one coming this way. We just the luck of the draw. It's just a matter of and the right environmental conditions. So,
Right. We could say we cannot attribute it to prayer.
well, prayer changes things.
There you
I
go.
can't discount that. I'm a firm believer in that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So what's up now? I know you're on your 16th
Yes.
book. You've already written 15 books already.
Yes.
One of the most published Bahamians there
Yes.
is right now, and particularly regarding hurricanes. And you're writing your 16th book now.
Yes,
What will this book be about?
This one will be on the 1933 hurricane season. It's basically just about finished. But what happened is that my last book, Hurricane Dorian, that was a New York Times bestseller. That was on number one on New York Times bestseller. It was also
Pause.
Yes.
Say that again.
New York Times bestseller.
And the name of the book?
Hurricane Dorian.
That's it. Hurricane Dorian
Yeah,
by
the-
Wayne Neely.
By Wayne Neely, yeah.
Number one.
Number
New York
one
best.
time. Tell us for it was in New York when it came out in October, late in October, early, and it came out as the number one on Amazon, number one research book, and the number one weather book in Amazon, and then it came on as number one New York Times bestseller, and it dropped off, and in May it came back on. And in August, the New York Times called me and said, look, we doing something we've never done before. We're going to feature your book for the entire month of August. And we're going to feature it in our magazine. So my book, Hurricane Dorian, every day was advertised free of charge. Free of charge. I didn't have anything to do with it. They just come, they put it, they had it in the New York Times for the entire list. So that the book company decided that because they want to capitalize on the publicity of the New York Times, they decided to extend the release date for the 1933 hurricane season, which is why I'm not having it out now. It's already finished, and it's just a matter of getting. So they capitalize on the sales of now continue. It's going to start winding up now. The hurricane season's over. Yeah.
Okay.
And congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I mean,
Does that
absolutely.
mean you make more money?
It made you get more sales. Yes.
Okay, good. I'm just making sure you're straight.
Yeah.
Might as well. And something to be proud of,
So-
especially being a Bahamian also.
You need to call Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture so that you could get a booth to display and sell your books
Yes.
at their December 15th cultural affair on Arawaki. Throughout the day, they're going to have local authors
Yes.
selling their books and making them
Yeah.
available for the general public.
Yeah, I
With
get
all
that.
15 of them, we know you
Yes.
can't release the 16th yet.
No.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell me about your current project. I know that you were doing some research on the 1920s hurricanes. I know this
Yes.
book is with the 1930s, and I guess that coincides
Yes.
with each other. But I want to hear some narratives, some stories of what was happening in the Bahamas during those times.
Yes.
Right? And the significance of this particular book research.
Okay. Well, first of all, my favorite book is the 1929 hurricane because that's my favorite. That's why I started. I wrote a first book on hurricane 1929, and my college professor, who at the time had went into he retired from COB, Mr. Neil Seeley, and he went to book publishing at Media Publishing, and I went to him. I said, look, I was excited. I said, Mr. Seeley, I wrote this book. I said, what's it on? I said, it's called the 1929 hurricane, and he said, why are you writing a book on 1929? And it was like, this was like around 2004. I said, yeah, I want you to publish it for me. He said, you're mad, you're crazy. That book won't sell. So I said, it was a little deflating because he's my to this day, he's still my mentor. He's one of my mentors that I respected. And he taught me, he was like a surrogate father for me when I went to COB. And he helped me a lot. And so I went to him, and it's like your mentor tell you don't do that. But you had a gut feeling that your mentor might be wrong. And so I said, look, I gonna publish it. I said, why? He said, because the hurricane occurred in when? He said 1929. He said, you mad? He said, because the book won't sell. I said, the people who now are alive now don't know about the storm. And the persons who experienced the storm are so old that most of them have Alzheimer's or don't read books or St. Bahamians in general don't read books. And he started going on all the reasons why. I said, okay, after I said, okay, but I still want to publish it, Mr. Seeley. Well, he said, fine, it's your money. And so I published it. We published it in November. And he said, look, we're going to bring out 500 copies. And he gave me, when the book came out in November, he gave me 490 copies. He said, I'm going to keep 10 for me to sell and the rest you. And I went on Charles Carter show at the time. I went on ZNS to talk about it. And the funny thing about it, I never expected the attention that book got, because I grew up in South Andres. I grew up, my parents and my grandparents always spoke about that storm in 1920, how deadly it was, how impactful it was. And most persons, and whenever I talk about that book, I get more calls to the Met Office and to my personal numbers and impact of. I put it on Facebook, get a lot of comments about it as well. And they say, oh, my parents told me about the storm, or my grandparents told me about the storm. So I got a lot. There was a lot of word. I mean, there was a lot of information out there, but nothing actually written until I wrote that book. And that's how I got started. And in about a week and a half, all 500 copies were sold out.
And fast forward to the future right now.
Yes.
The 15 books
Yes.
now become a part of the foundation of the policy for the government's climate financing
Yes.
platform, because now we have a compendium of
books, yes.
documentation to show the impact, the real impact of these storms on the geography, on the politics, on the economy, on the lives of Bahamians, and that supports and strengthens the argument that our government is putting forward, that the actions of these larger states have impacted us tremendously over decades, and we are still paying for their lapses.
Yeah, and it's also most of the universities that teaches all the schools in meteorology that teaches meteorology in the United States. My books are actually mandatory reading. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the reason why,
Something to celebrate, Aaron.
and every book, most all the universities, because one thing they said, my book was different from other books. When I brought them out, I talked about the impact of the storm. I also talk about the islands that were devastated. And a lot of these people are using these books as case studies. So a lot of, when you're a meteorologist, as a meteorologist, upcoming but person who wants to study meteorology and who wants to go into the meteorological field, this is the only book that, according to the professors, that features the impact of the storm on an island by island basis, the impact that it caused on the economy, the impact that it caused on each individual island. Whereas with other books on hurricanes, they never feature that. Nowadays, I have people now actually coming to me whenever they write a book. They want me to read over their book and give them advice, which I do. And the students, actually, a lot of them, even in China, I have mentors in China. I mean, who I mentee. There's 15 of them I mentor in the meteorological schools and at the universities in China. And MIT, Florida State, Florida International, and those are persons who actually come to me and give. And I can't tell you about the amount of Bahamian students who are studying environmental science or studying in atmospheric science throughout the country and throughout the region and the world that study them contact me.
And this is how you validate your local expertise. Mr. Neely's distinct storytelling ability. So the ability to capture
Yes.
information that others don't see as
Yeah,
valuable.
and I do recollections, personal recollections. and
That's what I
also-
want to talk about.
Yes.
You mentioned impact. You mentioned personal stories.
Yes.
Our personal narratives.
Yes.
With it included within your book.
In every one of my books, I try and with every book that I write, I have a section on a chapter on personal recollection, persons who experienced storm. For example, in the 1929 storm, I had people like Sir Derwent Knowles, Arthur D. Hanna, and others who experienced the storms, and noted persons, politician. I've had every politician I've interviewed, from Paul Adley to the only person I've not, Clement Maynard, Sir Orville Turnquest, Frank Watson, noted them about their impact and storm. And the hurricanes have a factor that when you talk about hurricanes, most people will recall hurricanes in a significant way, what they were doing and the impact that it had on their lives.
Yeah.
So, and even if, especially if it's a significant event like a death or a building was destroyed or they had to go into the elements and something like that.
Wow. I mean, I'm just overwhelmed by what is, sort of sits beneath or between the pages, right?
Yes.
This is not just recollections. This is valuable
Academic race, yes.
and scholarly work.
Yes.
Even the sort of cultural elements. Because I'm about to say to Mr. Newry, this is a wealth of information. He's a family tree man.
Yes.
And to study the migration of Bahamians through the archipelago and the region
Yes.
due to hurricanes,
Yes.
right? And how weather forces migration and displaces
Yes.
people. Like, so I'm seeing this work as a step
Yeah, for
forward
example,
to
like
policy.
in Murphytown and Abaco, there was a settlement in the 1932 hurricane season, which devastated Abaco. It was the first Category 5 hurricane that impacted the Bahamas
And what year?
in 1932.
Wow.
We've only had 4 on record, 4 hurricanes: Andrew, Dorian, the 1932 and the 1933, which I'm working on now. And there was a settlement in Abaco called Bluff Point. And when the Great Abaco Hurricane of 1932, because they never named them back then, when that occurred, it was a vibrant community of persons in Abaco in Bluff Point, and the hurricane wiped out Bluff Point. All the houses were destroyed, and the government decided to build houses back and in the Murphytown settlement, and that's where you get Murphytown.
Okay.
And in my hometown of South Andres, there was a settlement called Rural Town that was near Black Point, and storm came and destroyed that one. And there was also Hawk's Nest in southern part of Mars Bay in South Andres.
What? Hold
Hawks.
on. Hawk's Nest?
Yeah, Hawk's Nest. Yeah.
I mean, I've been to Mars Bay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, and just south of Mars Bay, it was Hawk's
Yeah.
Nest. And actually, because of the hurricane, I'm alive today. My grandfather, my great grandfather, they were caught in storm and they had to swim into the mainland, and they had to swim into the mainland, and at the time another gentleman, Isaac Ferguson, he lived in the settlement called Hawk's Nest.
Okay.
And his family, the Hawk's Nest was wiped out completely. So those persons moved to Mars Bay.
Okay.
So now a lot of those residents. And I'm a fisherman. I go fishing every August. Used to go fishing every August, and we would camp out at Hawk's Nest. There's nobody there now because you just have all buildings. The buildings are there, but there's nobody living there because after the hurricane, you had to move to another location.
So Neil, we have a phone call,
Yes.
someone who wants to engage you. But whilst we're going to connect with this phone call,
Yes.
Aaron knows I like history.
Yes.
Right? And I want to have a narrative on how these hurricanes impact society in terms of economics.
Good.
One time, I had a family member who said that the hurricane stopped sponging.
Yes.
Right? Which is contrary to that bug, the chineel bug. No, I forget what kind of red bug that the
Chinellus, that's the cotton.
cotton. Okay.
Yeah.
The bug that
fungus.
fungus was
Yes.
supposed to destroy the
Sponge.
sponges.
Yes.
I want to know, is that narrative true or not? But let me go to the to the caller, and then you think on about that.
Okay,
and tell
no
me your
problem.
narrative for that. For the caller,
Oh,
hang
we
up.
just lost the
Just
caller.
in time. Okay. So then you respond. Oh, the caller call back again. Go ahead, caller. Can you hear me? Call girl once. Okay, hang up again. So give some commentary on
Okay,
that.
yeah. When I started the first book on the 1929 hurricane, from 2001 to 2005, I researched all the hurricanes that impacted the region and the Bahamas. I went from time Christopher Columbus, the fleet of Christopher Columbus encountered the storm in 1500 near Crooked Island. That was the first one, and I went all the way up to Dorian, actually.
From 1500s?
From 1500, yes. There was a storm, the Pinta was
And I don't want to show. Where you get the research for 1500?
Columbus logbook and the ship log Bartolomeus Las Casas.
Oh, interesting. We're gonna
He copied, actually, the Columbus original logbook is lost. You can't find it no more. But Las Casas he copied the logbook, and so a lot of
de las Casas.
yeah.
Okay, I remember that name. The callers keep on coming in and dropping out. But continue. I'm sorry.
Yes, so I researched all the major hurricanes, and one thing that how I conducted it, I went to all the churches in New Providence. I went to every island in the Bahamas. I also went from North Andros to South Andros to talk about the 1929 hurricane. And on the family, I noticed a trend. Most of the family island sponge fishermen, because sponging was the number one industry at the time, most of the sponge fishermen said that they were happy that the sponging industry had collapsed because they said God killed the sponges. So I asked them, what do you mean by God killed the sponges? He said, yeah, because the Greeks were robbing the Bahamians, the sponge men. I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, if you got groceries from them, because the sponge man, they went out at sea. Sometimes they went out up to 8 weeks on vacation. So they would have to credit food for them, plus they credit the food for the family. But the merchants, who were comprised mostly of Greeks, funded the ships, the merchants. They provided the rope, they provided the sail, they provided the...
They provisioned the boat.
Yeah, provisioned the boat.
Yeah.
But they didn't just provision for the boat, they also provisioned for the person's family back on the respective islands.
Mm-hmm.
But what they did, let's say what they did was if a can of cream costs $1, they would up it to about $5. And the sponges felt unfair. But they had no choice. There was no money made. Fishing was around, farming was around, but you never got money. Everyone had a farm, and everyone had a boat to fish.
That was a subsistence farming.
Subsistence, yeah. So,
and I remember this trunk system. I remember reading it
Right.
in high school about sponging.
Yes.
But this narrative that a storm caused the
the
change
change,
is
yeah.
new to me.
Well, it was to me. I've never heard, and I researched. I did my major in College of the Bahamas and hurricane, main on history, and I also did the O-level Western history in high school. But I never heard that.
Well, I know.
And so I went to. I did the next place. I went to Lightfoot Key. I went to St. Susie. I went to Johnson Road. I interviewed the white oligarchs. I also interviewed the Greeks.
Yeah.
And so one gentleman saw me and he said, Wayne, I thank you, first of all, for sitting down and talking to me, because, say, over the years, my family has had a dark cloud over our family saying that we were accused of stealing. And he looked at the door, he saw my Jeep. He said, Mr. Neely, what is that car you have over there? I said, well, let me explain. I said, the sponge man said that you guys were robbing them. I said, Mr. Neely, what do you have over there? I say, that's my Jeep. Say, where did you get that from? I said, I went to the bank and I got it. Yeah. So he said, how much did you pay for it? I said, quite a costly bit. And I made a joke. I said, look, when I'm finished with that, I'll probably be paying for 2 Jeeps out of the interest rate you charge me. He said, good. So that's why I started that conversation. Said, the problem with the Greeks was that in the 1929 hurricane, there were 337 sponging vessels that were destroyed. In 1929, in the 1920s, a vessel was like a house payment. Mm-hmm. It was only afforded to by the well-to-do in the communities and those builders, the shipbuilders.
Who could build them? Yeah.
Yes, who could build them, and so they were expensive, and so the Greeks funded those vessels with groceries, but in the 1929, 337 of those vessels went down. Most of those went down with sponges on board. So it means that they never collected. They were not insured. So the only way that you could get your money back from them is through for the Greeks. They wouldn't get the money because there was no insurance on the vessels.
Right.
So they next best thing they had to up the price. So in 1929, you had so many vessels destroyed, and all the food they ate the food. The families ate the food, and they had no
nothing to
money.
reclaim.
Nothing to claim. They can't sell the sponges because the sponges went down with the boats.
Yeah.
And
So that whole year's
Recouping the money.
that was in 1929,
Yeah.
one storm. In 1926, you had 3 of them. And the same amount, it's 387 in 1926, Nassau hurricane of 1926. And that's in July. In September, you had the Great Miami hurricane of 1926. That was 100 plus behemoths died in that one. And the July one, it was 258 to 268 persons, depending on which source you use. And then you had one in October. And all of those caused deaths and destroyed the vessels. And most of the vessels at sea, back then you didn't have a weather report to talk about, to know that there was a storm approaching. They had things like watch the birds, they looked at the cloud patterns and everything else, but sometimes it's difficult to determine whether it was afternoon thunderstorm or whether it was actually
it's going to develop into a hurricane.
Yes.
Let's go to the phone line.
And then
there.
we talk about sponge again.
And we talk about sponging again. And this seems like a history book. It doesn't seem like a
It is a history,
meteorological
but that's
type
what it
book.
is. It is a history
Yeah,
book.
It's a human history.
When I went through those persons, I got from the Greeks, and I went to all of their families. I interviewed them. I went to the persons in the what do you call the Bay Street Boys, or what you got, the merchants.
Yeah.
I interviewed them. I interviewed the persons from Abaco, Andros, Exuma, Cat Island, Auckland, and you had a different viewpoint depending on how you look at it. And my job is as a historian to present out there what's happening out there, and allow you to read it to make your own determination.
Okay, so let's go to the caller. Caller, can you hear us? Caller go once. Caller go in twice. And disconnected there. Continue, Mr.
Let me
Go ahead.
let me just make this point quickly
Go ahead.
on the sponging. When you say you can't imagine a storm could destroy the sponge, I sell sea moss,
Yes,
local
yes,
sea moss.
yes.
It's harvested in the Kisal area.
Yes.
The sustainable way to harvest it, it's like a carpet. It's grass. It's like
Yes.
a carpet. A lot of people come and they'll just rip it up. But a sustainable harvest is you go down with a pair of scissors
Scissors
and
and just
trim
clip,
it,
yes,
right?
yes.
And a part of the reason is because it's such a delicate piece
Right.
of flora, right? The environment has to be exactly
Perfect, yes, yes.
for it to grow.
Grow, yes.
And so any disturbance on the ocean floor
Yes.
could potentially, at the wrong time of the year,
Yes.
say you have 2 weeks of cloud cover,
Yeah.
and then it's disturbed. It doesn't get the sunlight it needs to get. Plus, it's been covered with sand.
Sand,
That
and
could-
that's the exact same. I'm glad you
that
talked
could
about
destroy the entire
that
carpet.
devastated, and most persons didn't realize about the impact that these storms had. It did devastate the sponge beds. The sponge beds were, like I said, there was 3 storms in 1926, 1 in 1928, and all these are Category 4 storms. There was 1 in 29. There was 1 in 1932. There was 5 in 1933, and they decimated the sponge bed. And people assume that the fungus just wanted it. You had a healthy, thriving population, but at that time, actually, that was not the case. The sponging was on decline, actually, and
Diminished,
significant
yeah.
decline. And the governor at the time, he did something which is unique, and he started teaching them to, what they do, they cut the sponges. They used to just take the thing and pull the entire sponge up. So now he told them to go down and cut them with the shears, and just leave the root of the
Yeah.
sponge onto and it regenerated
Faster, yeah.
And they also was thinking about implementing a closed season for sponges as well. And the sponge bed were devastated by those storms. And the fishermen who I spoke to from different islands said, look, when you went out there after the storm, and what they did, they sent out scouts after each storm. They would send out just a boat. The governor would pay for the scouts to go to the different sponge beds. In the area in Andros, it was called the Mud. There was a small sponge bed in Exuma, and the Exumas as well. And there are other small locations that most persons went to, Andros and the western coast of Andros, where they call the Mud. That's where you had the most prevalent storm. I mean, that sponges there, and the waters were clear, and the waters were very shallow. So, and you could pick them you could harvest them very easy. But when the hurricane came, hurricane comes with a lot of silt and it kills the sponge. Sponge is actually it's an animal, thing, and it breeds. So once that mud forces the sponge to
Suffocates it.
suffocates it. So they send scouts out to see where it's safe enough for them to do some sponging. When they first went after in 29, I know about 29 and 2016, they recorded those and documented. And they talked about they sending scouts out. The first 2 times they went in 26, there was completely, sponges were still in a sad state. And then the third time they started to do sponging.
Is there any time when hurricanes is good for the environment?
Yes.
So it's not just evil; it's something that is needed.
Yes, needed.
How is hurricane needed?
Hurricanes benefit in several ways. First of all, hurricane acts as the Earth's filter system. If you take a hurricane out of the Earth, none of us will survive. We would all die in short time, because hurricanes cleanses the atmosphere of pollutants, and it cleanses the air of pollutants, and takes all the toxins and pollutants out of the atmosphere. If you take, I see some people will try and get rid of the hurricane. If you take a hurricane out, eventually the air would get so toxic that we would not be able to sustain life and support life. Second, hurricanes also account for 60% of the tropical rainfall in the tropics comes from hurricanes. If you take that out, in other words, you have water industries, you have people manufacturing, and those industries would not exist. And you also have, it cleanses the environment, places like the Everglades, and it gets rid of the old dying trees. It gets rid of the deadly, the weaker species, and allow the thriving ones to progress, like, for example, trees. And
Caller's still there.
Okay. Caller, you can hear me? Caller, go
About the 1929 hurricane.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Newry. Good morning, sir.
good morning.
Yeah, I was told a story about we had a 1929 hurricane that affected New Providence, right?
Yes.
Right. I was told a story about my grandmother. They had a home on the corner of Camp Road and Shirley Street, a 2-story wooden home. And she said when the hurricane came to New Providence, my grandfather, what he did was he wrapped a rope around each one of the kids. There's a few of them, plus my grandmother. In the downstairs in the main room, he tied this rope, one wrap around one rope, and then go to the next kid until all of them had the rope around them. And apparently the front door blew open. He went to try and close the front door, and the gust of the wind hit him from behind and knocked him straight across the room, through them, and he was knocked out for must be about a half an hour. And then also I wanted to ask you, down on West Bay Street, by where Mr. Flowers has his building now,
Yes.
there was the two, I remember growing up, we used to call it Long Wall, between where Mayfair Hotel is and where Mr. Flowers' building is now. There was a big 2-story gray building set back in the yard almost to Virginia Street.
Yes.
And all you used to see there, it looked like a warehouse. It used to be full with sponge all over the yard and all inside this big warehouse where people would look like they were down there, must be cleaning, or I don't know what they was doing with it. But I think that building, I don't know if they got a history or a photograph of that building, but there was a sponge house right there.
Yeah, there
Have a
was.
great day.
Yeah, there was one there, and actually, my book on the 26 hurricane and the 29 I know the building that you're talking about. I have several photos on. I have several photos on that building itself, and the sponge in the yard. That was in the 26 hurricane. It looked like someone just walked on the building and squashed the building. It held sponge warehouse. There were several of them in the downtown area. Yes.
Okay, so I get a question and a comment in true Bahamian style.
Yes.
The comment is what you said prior to Sparky's call about the benefit of hurricanes to the planet.
Yes.
I need you to go to the office of the Prime Minister right now because everything that you're saying informs this policy position of the state right now around climate financing.
Yes.
Right? It just adds to this discussion that, hey, the Bahamas is special to the world.
Yes.
Countries that are in hurricane zones, we are special to the world. And because we right here, we have every scientist trying to figure out how to stop hurricanes.
Yes.
And then we realize, no, we can't stop them.
We can't.
We have to figure out how to protect ourselves from hurricanes because the whole planet needs hurricanes.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. This,
You had, like I said, you had 60% of the tropical contains in water. And if one of the critical things that hurricanes do, hurricanes, what we call heat engines, hurricanes take heat from the equator and transfer it to the poles. The cold front does the opposite. It transfers cold air from the poles to the equator. Now, what God gave that hurricane a mandate, take heat from the equator, and he didn't care about which island it's going to go over and destroy. But all that hurricane's doing is its purpose on the earth, which is take heat from the equator, transfer to pole. It's called the heat transfer process. And what the hurricane does, unfortunately, when it gets to the temperate regions, it starts to die out because of the environmental conditions. And it takes that warm air. If you don't have that transfer, the equator will get progressively hotter and hotter, and the poles get progressively colder and colder, and not sustain life. And none of those locations, and eventually the implied planet won't be able to support life because of lack of heat transfer. And in the 60s, the U.S. government, at the time, it was right after the World War II, the U.S. government and under the President's commission, he held a commission to say, look, these hurricanes are destroying our buildings. Let's find a way to stop the hurricanes. And they developed a system called Project Storm Fury, which was the U.S. government hired all the experts, the top experts in the country, in the U.S., to determine how ways to stop a hurricane. And they pumped millions of dollars into it. And the funny thing about it, they tried several. They wanted to coat the water with oil, with a sleek oil. So, and their idea was that would stop the transfer, the heat from transferring from the water to the hurricane itself. Yeah. But they found that would be a problem because hurricane is so great, the size is so great, and the pollution that would come about it because of that.
Yeah, you can't cover that.
You can't cover
ocean with oil.
And second, the hurricane winds are very strong. It's going to
pick that up and throw it on my house.
Yes. And so they tried, and they wanted to drop a nuclear bomb because they had just had nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima in Japan. Mm-hmm. And so they said, okay, we'll drop a nuclear bomb in the center of the storm, and hopefully that'll break the hurricane up. And when they found out, they did testing, and they found that won't have no or little effect on the storm.
Good. It didn't make the storm stronger.
It didn't make it. And they tried something called silver iodine crystal. They dropped that into the eye wall of the storm to try and weaken the storm. The idea was that it forces the hurricane to rain itself out. Okay. And they still do that. And when I went to China, to universities, they still do that in China and like places like Thailand. They actually cloud the rain.
Absolutely.
They actually see the clouds for their rain crop, for their rice crops. They do that to this day. But in the U.S., they didn't do that because what happened was that they seeded a hurricane called Ginger, and it went over Cuba, and it devastated Cuba. And Cuba said, look, the reason why that storm devastated us, Cuba threatened to go take the United States to the World Court because they said, look, the storm is going to cause havoc on our and cause destroy our homes and everything because of you seeding the storm. So legally they had to stop. So, and they also tried other features as well, but they came up with it. Say, look, it's nothing we can do to stop a hurricane. It's too big. It's too massive for these things to work.
Let me ask you a question though. You call the hurricane Grammy? Did you call this Grammy? Because that's the only thing that could make a hurricane rule.
Yeah. We have one more caller here, Aaron. So let's patch that caller through. Go ahead, caller. Can you hear me? Caller, go ahead.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Go ahead.
And good afternoon to your guest. I have a question. In reference to the intensity of storms we're having in the Bahamas, how does our building material, like glass and tin roofs, does that contribute to the intensity of storm where you would have the sun now could use these materials to kind of help them straighten storms and rains and whatever? How does the material we're using in the Bahamas contributing intensity of storm. I asked the question because a few years ago in Atlanta, there was an unusual storm took place in downtown Atlanta. And they brought all the engineers and architects and all the persons who are responsible for the environment. And because the storm was so unusual and the intensity of the storm, they discovered that the material that they were using in these buildings contribute to the intensity of the storm. I'll hang up and listen.
Well, I think it's the opposite. What happened is that in the 1920s, you had a lot of you had most of the houses were substandard. Most of the houses were in the 1920s and early 30s. You had most of the houses were substandard houses. So the devastation, for example, a Category 4 hurricane back then was like actually a Category 5 of today. And so what happened in the 1926 hurricane, you had 3 storms. 1928, you had 1 storm. You had 1929 with 1 storm. And all those, once they passed over a particular island, it devastated those islands because what happened is that most of the houses were substandard. You had just tin roofs. The walls they were much thicker, but they were not up to building codes. And because of the 1929 hurricane, that's the reason why we got mandatory building codes for the Bahamas.
Let's talk with codes. Go ahead, Aaron.
I've been hearing this myth all my life that island stone
Yes.
and island building techniques
Yes.
can withstand hurricanes.
Yeah, they do. The walls itself are very good with.
Now,
with
is that because they use the conch shell and
The
the,
conch shell,
lime,
lime,
in the conch
yes.
shell and the island rock,
Yes.
the calcium carbonate with our special aragonite, that rock, is that true? Those homes, go on.
No, I said let's top that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? When we saw Dorian,
Yes.
we saw they had the hurricane-proof windows.
Yes.
Right? The whole building collapsed.
Yeah,
left the
building-
windows.
windows there, yes.
Right? And now we have in this new carbon building.
Oh, right. The Patana Global
Yeah, what does
company.
it?
Yeah,
what
Red
does it get
Fox and
stronger?
all, yeah.
So they-
stronger?
right, it's
Can
saying-
that withstand hurricane?
Well, they said it can withstand Category 5, but I guess you'll find out soon enough better not.
It could withstand
Yeah,
it.
but most of the buildings back then they had tin roofs and they had straw roofs.
Right, they're
People
like
just
thatch.
went to thatch roofs, right?
Yeah.
Thatch palms.
Because thatch roofs are great, right?
So
if they're
what
built
will
properly, but you have to replace them.
You have to replace them. So
Yeah.
it was easy to replace. So they just went to the pine barrens and get more thatch palm and just put it there.
Yeah.
Now the good thing that if you notice, and most of the even the buildings I talk about in South Andrews like Mars Bay and
Yeah.
Hawks Nest and those places, the roof is gone. But the building structure is so thick and it's so massive that it's withstands the hurricanes.
Right.
And people, my persons from Andres, the older folks, fishermen, my grandfather and all that say that was a stronger building because they took time and they took effort, and they had the water very thick to withstand hurricane, the might of the hurricane winds.
Yeah, Cecil, take my oats to the billy goat. I tell my family, when we settle my grandmother's property and all of
Yes.
all I want is the Andres pine and the Andres stone.
Yeah, and yes.
That's all I want.
I know when my parents they put extension on and they had to cut the roof off. We had Andres pine. I think they built it in the 60s, and termite eat the normal the abaco pine. That was solid. You could use that and they still use some of that. And termite eat all the new wood, but the old abaco pine wood was not touched.
Yeah. Wow. We need to be doing research on it, and that's why the work that you do is so
Yes.
important. Not only is the documentation important, the preservation of culture and practice important,
Yes.
but you provide a space for young and new thinkers and scientists to see the potential, what they can explore, and what they can find
Yes.
out, and what we should be documenting.
Let's try to fit these other callers in. As Xavier of 2. Producer, patch that first caller through for me, please. Go ahead, caller. Can you hear me?
Well, good morning, CA and
Good morning, Graham. How you
everyone
doing?
else. You know, my grandfather built a house in Abaco out of Abaco pine wood. Still stands today. Made it through Dorian and through, was it the 26th that hit Abaco?
The 32.
32?
Yeah, I think that one of your family members, and Del Bedford, died in that 32 hurricane.
Well, he told me one before that, so I don't know what year it would have been.
There was one in 29, there was one in 28, and one in Well, there were 3 and 26. All of them were impacted by Abaco.
Yeah, the 26th,
Impacted now.
the house came off the foundation
Yes,
because you would put wooden houses on the little stilts,
yes,
and it floated up the hill about 25 feet
yes.
where it landed. So that was water building up more than Dorian built up.
Yes, in
It
fact,
wasn't documented, I guess.
yeah, no, that part that was a normal thing. And for example,
Yeah.
Rupert Roberts, the proprietor of
Just
Super Value.
Before we run out of time,
Yes.
water always builds up in the bay there because of how hurricanes spin. But I want to ask everybody, what 5 things have we implemented that we will do different next year during the hurricane season that we have not done before Dorian? In other words, do we learn something? And what 5 things did we learn to do different, or will we do different? And second question, does HARP in Alaska have anything to do with weather patterns in our country and in the region? But most important is, tell us the 5 things we've done differently. You all have a good one, eh?
Okay, let me see if I can squeeze this next
Right.
caller
And
in.
Graham, that's a great question, but I think it's more rhetorical and not enough time to explore those 5 things.
I love the question, though.
Yeah.
Go ahead, caller. Can you hear me? Caller girl once.
that me?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
you.
we can
That's
hear
you.
Oh, godly day. This is Zach in the voice along with you and your guest, Newry, and of course, Aaron.
Hey, good day.
I have a question to the gentleman. I know of a house, right, a home, was made of thatch roof, right?
Mm-hmm.
A thatch house, period. The whole thing made of thatch, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's still standing today throughout all of those hurricanes. Why is it so you suppose it's still standing? And why people live in house in those days as such?
Well, I don't know. I know for a fact there was a gentleman in South Andres. We call him George Phillip, and he had a house right on the beach. It went from the roof all the way down to the bottom with just thatched palms. And many persons would go during the storm. I know my parents went and said, "Look, you could come and live with us until the storm is over." He said, "No, he's going to stay there." And he stayed, and he survived many storms in that same thatch roof. And unfortunately, I think it was caught fire, and eventually
Has the building technique been captured, though?
the building. Yes, we have. For example, the 1929 hurricane. Before then, you could just build just regular, with just lime and your conch shell and everything. After the 1929 hurricane, when they evaluate the building codes, one of the persons who came over was Herbert Saffer, who famous with the Saffer-Simpson scale.
Yeah.
Someone who developed the first building codes of the Bahamas. And one thing that they started doing was putting steel rods inside the corner of the buildings to tie the steel with the. They also put tar paper or tar roof and shingle. Those were implemented. You also had foundation. The walls of the doors and everything had to be supported with steel rods, and those things are still in place. And you at the time, Hurricane Eclipse I think came after Betsy of '65.
Okay.
Yes.
See, because if my house get picked up by the flood water and wash up the hill and settle in one whole piece,
Yes.
I own that property now. That's where my house is now, and we live here now. And if we live here next to y'all, hello neighbors.
Yeah, Mr. Roberts told me a story, Rupert Roberts, about he was in Abaco, he lived in Abaco, and the hurricane blew his house. Him and his family was inside the house, and they didn't even notice the building had moved, and the building blew all the way into the pine barrens. And when when his father opened the door, his father was surprised to see that the building actually had moved such a quite distance.
Floated away.
Man, Rupert Roberts, you have to tell that story every day. You guys tell us that story,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
So we're about to close, right?
Yes.
When is the new book will be out?
The new book, I have to get the final approval from the publisher, but we're trying to get it out as soon as possible. Hopefully, probably in the next 2-3 weeks or so.
Oh, so
Okay.
by
Yeah.
next year,
Yeah,
early
by
next year.
Early next year, yes.
It should be out.
Yeah.
And what do you recommend for the Bahamas to do in terms of preparing for hurricanes?
Well, the thing about preparing, the good thing about preparing, you and your can of tuna and can of corned beef,
I have plenty corned beef.
you can eat them, right? They're not going to go to waste.
There you go. Aaron, you want to come by?
If you cooking, yes.
Yeah, I have plenty canned. I was preparing for this hurricane, Aaron. Yeah.
You're not gonna you're not gonna do, and you still be prepared. Be on mindful, and mind you, hurricanes still can occur outside the hurricane season.
Yeah, that's
but-
why I'm going to ask you what you're talking about. The hurricane season.
It's
over.
December 1st, hurricane over.
Shh, don't let the hurricane hear you.
Hear me.
Yeah, last year we had a hurricane in January. In fact, the first
we had a
hurricane.
Hurricane in January?
Yes.
I should have started off with that. I didn't know we had a hurricane in January.
Yeah, the first one. And
You wake in the hotel. You don't live in these things. You live a good life. A quick question: there's some people with this crazy theory, right? They say that people in the U.S. drive on the right because of the direction in which tornadoes turn.
Yeah.
Mr. Scientist,
Yes.
could you debunk that for me, please? I don't believe that.
no,
No, you believe that?
no, I don't. But the funny thing about it, and rotation of the storm, that they believe that was developed by the Taino or the Lucayan Indians, because what happened to this day they don't know how they developed, but they knew that the Lucayan Indians realized that hurricanes had a cyclonic circulation, and they believe the storm god was named after hurricane. That's why we got the name hurricane.
Yeah.
And the rotation of the winds, they didn't know how to determine it, but they assumed that
knew it.
either they looked at the smallest phenomenon like a tornado and decided that hurricane rotates the same way as the tornado. But to this day, nobody knows how they developed, and same thing with the Maya Indians, how they developed, knowing that hurricanes rotated in certain direction.
Anyway, we got to go. We got to invite
Yeah.
you back. We got to invite you back to interrogate hurricanes and tell stories again. These stories are a part of us and important for our narrative. But thank you very much, Aaron,
My
for staying
pleasure.
back. Thank you very much, Wayne Neely. We wish you good success, best success for your new book and new endeavors. And we need to get copies of this.
We can fight
all
over these
15
two books
books.
right now, sir.
Yeah. He didn't bring them for us.
You don't. I mean, you say us. I think you meant he didn't bring them for you. He may have
Sunday.
brought them for me. We have to ask.
This has been Guardian Radio AM with C.A. Newry. Have a blessed day.
Okay.